This is the second Land Rover camper that I'm building, and if it's one thing I learned from the first one, it's don't waste space building cabinets or things that you don't really need just because it looks nice. In case you don't know what I do, I'm living and traveling full-time in cars, doing photography. And the last car, I lived in that for more than 4 years. And there's obviously a lot of things that you figure out along the way. And the most important thing is, the inside of a car does never actually look as tidy and pretty as it does on all of these Instagram profiles, because if you're actually traveling full-time or living in it full-time, you're bound to just put a bunch of stuff in there. Storage is 100% the most important thing, but it can also be a hassle if you make storage solutions which is not functional. I just picked up a bunch of stuff from one of my storage locations, so just let's pretend that all of this clutter is invisible. But in my last setup with the old Discovery, I had the bed platform down here, making a small unit of storage underneath that, as well as having a huge cabinet on this side. And having a cabinet built for a dedicated spot is not a bad thing if you have room to lose and you also don't mind the extra weight. And me complaining about weight is going to be a key factor in this build, because this bad boy has 64 horses, I think. And my old car had about the same, plus an additional 200 extra horses. So this is the first time for me where weight is actually a key factor. So with this, I'm trying to build something that looks pretty, is functional, and without too much wasted space. And that's why the bed is now moved way up, inching towards being too close to the roof, which is actually one of the things a lot of the people commented on a video I posted to my story the other day. But something I learned from the last build is it's way easier to build storage underneath the bed than trying to build something above the bed. But with the sleeping platform up here, I'm able to have a full-size cooler, I'm able to have bags and boxes and my skis laying fully flat down there. But how do you access all of this? I'm glad you asked. The plan is to buy some heavy-duty tracks, pull-out tracks, if that's the correct word, and have one single base plate pulling out about this far from the back of the car. So I'm actually not going to build a dedicated box drawer system. I'm just going to have one base plate with like mounting points, obviously, so I can have everything bolted down there, but I can also swap it around. I can take it out instead of having a dedicated box, which will forever be a dedicated box. The longer you live in a car, you just have to accept that it's a rolling project and things does change along the way. For example, you realize you don't want the 25-liter cooler, you need the 45. You need room for that, and if you build something very dedicated to just one thing, you have to redo that instead of having a pull-out system, which is just a plate. I'm not saying this is the best idea ever because I just came up with this. So along the way I'm probably going to say, well, this was the dumbest mistake I've ever done, but I'm going to try this since the other option did not work for me. Another thing worth mentioning with this build, at least at this stage, is everything is kinda temporary. I should have been on the road a long time ago, so I'm buying everything locally at IKEA, Bauhaus, hardware stores, which is why I'm not throwing big money on expensive drawer systems, expensive insulation or anything like that. I'm just building a very simple setup so that I can start traveling as soon as possible. But speaking of IKEA, doing a build like this, it's really easy to get starry-eyed by all of the fancy gear that you can buy. Especially if you have a Defender, for example, or a different very popular travel car, because there's so much gear you can buy. And I'm trying to just think, well, do I need that? And I'm not really the right person to say that because I love gear. But with a tight budget, a weak car, limited time, it's made me realize that I don't really need too much, especially since I have a lot of things from the old car. So basically I could have hit the road way earlier. I could have been on the road now, but at least I want the interior to look pretty, especially since I'm filming everything I do. So given that I'm trying to build this quite fast and cheap, I'm not doing anything which is not reversible. For example, I'm trying to bolt stuff down in non-visible places like the cross beams in the roof. I'm also trying to not permanently cover up this seam, this one above the windshield, a few on the back, because it's a series and it will start to leak sometime. You don't really know when, but sometime. Quite funny actually, the service manual for both this and the Defender is a picture of 3-4 guys sitting inside the car looking at all of these different seams, why a fourth guy is standing outside of the car with a pressure washer to just blast the whole car, whilst 4 mechanics is supposed to be inside of the car looking for water penetrating the car. And this is in the actual workshop manual. But it's cool though. Above the panel I'm putting up in the roof, I have about 1.5 inches of foam insulation with reflective foil, plus the additional bubble wrap reflective foil before the actual roof lining, which also has 16 millimeters. I'm not sure what's in it. The metric system is the best. Anyhow, there's a bunch of stuff going up there, so it is going to insulate to some degree. All of these layers are mainly there to keep the warm air inside the car, but it also makes the car a much nicer place to sleep, because the original thin alloy plates, they're extremely loud if it's raining. A major difference between this build and the last one is the Discovery was registered as a working van, and because of that it had a dividing wall behind the front seats. So the full length of the back in that car was about 180, and I'm 185 I think. So this is the first time in 4 years that I have a full-size bed inside the car. It does kind of limit the passenger seat, but it doesn't sound like a me problem. It's also worth mentioning that I've always had a roof rack, but I've never had a roof rack this big. So I'm thinking to just have boxes, bags, solar, tents, everything I can will go up there, because I'd much rather have a nice and comfortable living compartment and just climb up there if I need something. I'm a young guy, I can climb, I have a ladder.